Welcome back, everyone. Are you ready for another deep dive into today's current affairs? We've got a lot to cover today, and we're going to try to hit on all sorts of different areas, especially if you're a UPSC aspirant.
Absolutely. We've got global crime, we've got groundbreaking scientific discoveries, we've got a little bit of sustainable tourism. We're even going to touch on some history and culture today.
So you're going to come away feeling informed, maybe even learn a few fascinating bits of trivia to impress your friends with.
Sounds good.
Okay, let's start off with something that sounds straight out of, like, a spy movie.
Hmm.
Interpol just launched something called a silver notice.
A silver notice.
What is that? I don't even know what that is.
Well, so it's a new tool to help law enforcement track down and recover stolen assets.
Stolen assets. Yeah.
It targets assets linked to a whole range of criminal activities. We're talking fraud, corruption, you name it.
So, like, what kind of assets are we talking? Like someone's, like, ill-gotten luxury car.
Exactly. Luxury cars, hidden bank accounts, artwork, anything of value that criminals try to stash away.
Okay, so why now? Why is this the time for something like this?
Well, it's interesting. This silver notice was actually prompted by a request from Italy. They're trying to track down the assets of a high-ranking mafia boss.
Oh, wow. Okay. So, like, they just couldn't do it themselves?
Well, it's tricky when assets are hidden across international borders. You need cooperation from multiple countries. And that's what this silver notice is designed to do.
Okay, so this silver notice is like an international warrant or something.
It's more like a global alert system. It lets countries share information and work together to locate and seize those hidden assets. And it's not just for mafia bosses. It can be used for any kind of criminal activity that involves moving assets across borders.
So for our listeners who are, particularly interested in kind of India's role in all of this, this is a pilot project involving 52 different countries, including India.
Exactly.
This could be a game changer in recovering assets from economic offenders who have fled the country, right?
Potentially, yes. It could be a powerful tool, but, the effectiveness really depends on how well countries cooperate and enforce it. We'll have to see how this plays out in practice.
Yeah, there's always the challenge of international cooperation.
Definitely.
All right. Let's shift gears completely now from the world of international crime to something completely different, the microscopic world of bacteria and plastic. Now, we've all heard about the problem of plastic pollution, right? It's a huge issue. But what if there was a bacteria that could actually help us solve it?
Well, that's what some researchers are exploring right now. There's a bacteria called Sulfobacillus acidophilus.
Sulfobacillus acidophilus.
It's a mouthful, I know.
It is.
But this bacteria produces a very unique enzyme. And this enzyme can actually break down DEHP, which is a common plasticizer found in everyday products.
DEHP, that sounds kind of familiar. Isn't that in a lot of plastic products? Even like baby toys and stuff.
Yes, that's right. And that's why this research is so significant. DEHP is a type of phthalate, and these chemicals have been linked to some pretty serious health problems like hormone disruption and reproductive issues.
It's not good.
Definitely not. But what's remarkable about this enzyme is that it doesn't just break down the plastic, it actually transforms those harmful phthalates into something completely harmless: water and CO2.
Wow. So it's like not just breaking down plastic, but it's actually turning it into something that's completely harmless to the environment and to people, right?
Exactly. It's like a natural detoxification process.
That is pretty amazing. Is this something that, like, could be scaled up, to actually tackle this, like, massive problem of plastic waste?
That's the big question. It's still early days, More research needs to be done to figure out how to make this work on a larger scale. One of the challenges is that this enzyme, it's very specific. It only works for a short time unless it's actually inside the bacteria.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and the whole process involves a sequence of 5 different enzymes all working together. It's actually quite a complex process.
It is. It sounds, yeah, very complex.
Yeah.
All right, well, this is definitely a story to follow, and as we try to figure out how to deal with this huge issue of plastic pollution, so we'll keep an eye on that. Now, let's move on to a little bit more of a medical mystery, shall we? Have you ever heard of trichophyton indotinae?
Trichophyton indotinae. I can't say I have.
It's a fungus, and it causes skin infections. And it was, get this, it was recently named after India.
Oh, really?
Yes.
And it causes skin infections.
Yes, it causes skin infections.
Interesting.
But here's the thing. It turns out that this fungus is actually found in over 40 countries worldwide.
Wait, so it's not unique to India?
No, not at all.
But it's named indotinae.
Exactly. And that's where the controversy comes in. There's a convention of naming pathogens after their supposed origin, right?
Yeah.
But in this case, it seems like maybe someone jumped the gun a little bit.
I see. So is that why some dermatologists are now petitioning to change the name?
That's exactly right. They're saying, hold on a second. This name is misleading. It's not accurate.
Makes sense. But it's interesting though, right? Like what are the broader implications here? We're talking about scientific accuracy, obviously. But what about like the potential for stigma, associating a disease with a particular region?
Yeah. And for our UPSC aspirants listening, this is something to pay attention to. Trichophyton indotini, definitely something to be aware of. It's highly contagious. It can cause widespread infections, those nasty ringworm-type infections.
Right, and it's resistant to some common antifungal treatments.
Exactly. So understanding this, its nature, its global spread, it's crucial, not just for the exams, but also just for public health awareness as well.
Absolutely.
All right. Let's switch gears again now. From a concerning fungus to something a little bit more uplifting. Let's head over to Kerala.
Two stunning beaches there, Kapad and Shal, have just been awarded the prestigious Blue Flag certification. The Blue Flag, fantastic. That's a big deal.
It is a big deal.
It's a globally recognized symbol of, sustainable tourism, right?
Absolutely. And it means that these beaches meet very high standards in terms of environmental management, water quality, safety, education, the whole package.
So what are the actual criteria for getting a Blue Flag?
So there are four main criteria. First of all, the water quality has to be exceptional. It has to meet strict international standards for cleanliness and being free of pollutants.
So you can actually swim there and you're not going to get sick.
Exactly. The second one is environmental management. And this goes beyond just keeping the beach clean. We're talking about things like waste management, sustainable infrastructure, protecting the surrounding ecosystem, the whole 9 yards.
It's a holistic approach.
Exactly. So it's not just about having pretty sand. It's about the whole approach to managing the area sustainably.
Right.
The third criteria is safety and services. Very important. This means having, adequate lifeguard services, first aid facilities, accessible infrastructure for everyone.
So everyone can enjoy it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And finally, the beach has to prioritize environmental education.
Education, okay.
Yeah. So there needs to be clear information about the local ecosystem, responsible tourism practices, opportunities for visitors to actually learn and engage with the environment.
So it's about raising awareness, promoting sustainability.
Absolutely. And with these two new additions, India now has a total of 13 Blue Flag beaches.
Wow, 13. That's great.
It is great. It is a testament to India's commitment to, sustainable tourism. It's definitely a feather in the cap for Kerala, which is already known for its beautiful, beautiful natural beauty.
Absolutely.
Now let's shift gears again to a topic that's, close to a lot of hearts: organ donation. There's been a significant development in India recently aimed at encouraging more people to actually become organ donors.
Oh, that's good to hear. What is it?
So the National Organ and Tissue Transplant Organization, NATO, has announced a new policy for central government employees. If they donate an organ, they will now receive 42 days of special leave.
Wow, 42 days. That's quite a significant amount of leave.
It is. It's a very tangible way to kind of, show support and encourage people to consider this life-saving act.
That's a great initiative.
Yeah, absolutely.
But what exactly is NATO? What role do they play in all this?
So NATO is a really important organization in India's healthcare system. It's responsible for coordinating and facilitating organ and tissue transplants across the country.
Okay, so it's more than just finding donors.
Much more. It's about making sure those organs actually get to the people who need them, that the whole process is safe, timely, and transparent.
So they're the central hub for everything related to transplants.
Exactly. They maintain a national registry of donors and recipients. They coordinate the allocation of organs. They even provide training and support for transplant professionals.
It's a comprehensive system. That's really impressive.
Yeah, it is. And this new policy for central government employees is definitely something to watch. It could have a significant impact on organ donation rates in India.
Absolutely.
And for our UPSC aspirants out there, this is a development worth noting, not just for its policy implications, which could very well be tested in exams, but also, because of its potential to actually improve healthcare outcomes across the country.
It's a real step towards addressing a critical need.
Absolutely. All right, speaking of critical needs, let's talk about infrastructure and international relations. Over in Bhutan, a massive hydropower project just achieved a major milestone with the first 2 units of the Punit second hydroelectric project coming online.
Punit 2, wow.
It's a mouthful.
It is a mouthful, but it's a huge project, right?
Right, it is.
Like, how big are we talking?
This project is capable of generating 1 gigawatt of power.
1 gigawatt.
1 gigawatt.
Mm-hmm.
That's enough to power a major city, and it's what we call a run-of-the-river project.
Run of the river. Okay, now that's a term our UPSC aspirants should be familiar with. What does that mean exactly?
So it means that it relies on the natural flow in the river to generate electricity, rather than creating like a large reservoir behind a dam.
So it's a more sustainable approach to hydropower.
Yes, exactly.
Less environmental impact.
Less environmental impact.
Okay.
This project, though, is not just about, clean energy. It's also a fantastic example of international collaboration.
Oh, how so?
Well, India is actually funding this project.
Oh.
Yeah. And all of the surplus power that's generated, it's going to be exported to India.
So it's a win-win for both countries.
Exactly. Bhutan gets much-needed clean energy, right?
Right.
And India gets a reliable source of renewable energy to meet its growing demands.
It's a smart partnership.
It is a smart partnership. Now, time for a little bit of culture in history.
Okay, I like this part.
Have you ever heard of the Boda Tihor Festival?
The Boda Tihor Festival. I can't say that I have.
Well, it marks the biggest annual event for a fascinating community known as the Hatties. And they reside in the beautiful landscapes of Himachal Pradesh.
The Hatties of Himachal Pradesh.
Okay. Now, their homeland actually straddles the border between Himachal Pradesh and Uttarakhand.
Okay.
So right there's a little bit of geography for you.
Okay.
For our UPSC aspirants, it's always good to know where things are on the map.
Always good to know your geography.
Always good to know your geography. Now, the Hatties, they have a distinctive white headgear that they wear, especially during ceremonial occasions.
It's always interesting to learn about these unique cultural traditions.
Absolutely. And they have a fascinating traditional governance system led by a council called the Kumbli.
The Kumbli Council, okay.
Now, the name Hatti, it's believed to have actually originated from their traditional occupation, which was selling goods at local markets called hats.
Oh, interesting. So Hatti from hot.
Exactly. And just recently, the Hatties achieved a significant milestone. They were granted scheduled tribe status.
Wow, that's a big deal. What does that mean for them, practically speaking?
So this recognition provides them with certain constitutional rights and safeguards aimed at protecting their culture, their identity, and promoting their socioeconomic development.
It's a step towards greater equality and inclusion.
Absolutely. And it's a reminder that India's cultural tapestry is incredibly diverse.
Yeah, it's rich.
It's rich, it's vibrant.
And constantly evolves.
But constantly evolving, yes.
It's great to see these communities being recognized and celebrated. And there's always more to learn and discover. Speaking of discoveries, let's turn our attention to the Indian Navy. They've just taken delivery of the INS Vagsheer, the final submarine in the Scorpion class.
That's a big boost to India's defense capabilities, right? Tell me more about INS Vagsheer.
Well, the name itself is intriguing. Vagsheer refers to a deadly sandfish found in the Indian Ocean. It's known for its stealth and its predatory nature.
So fitting for submarine, then?
Absolutely, and this submarine lives up to its name. It's one of the quietest submarines in the world, equipped with all sorts of technology to minimize its noise signature.
So it's a silent predator.
Exactly, a silent predator lurking in the depths, making it very difficult to detect.
What kind of missions can it handle?
It's a multi-role submarine, so you're looking at anti-submarine warfare, intelligence gathering, surveillance, and even launching attacks on enemy ships and coastal targets.
A versatile addition to the fleet.
Very versatile.
And with this delivery, that marks the 6th and final submarine in the Cavalry class.
It does, and it represents a major step forward for India in modernizing its naval fleet and, enhancing its presence in the Indian Ocean.
Okay, so from the depths of the ocean, now to a surprising discovery in, well, a different kind of watery environment. Researchers in Rajasthan's Keeladeo National Park have found an abundance of a unique plant. It's called Utricularia.
Utricularia.
Now, it might sound harmless enough, but here's the twist. It's carnivorous.
A carnivorous plant? That's fascinating. I have to admit, I'm picturing like some giant Venus flytrap.
Yeah, I mean, it's not quite as dramatic as what you see in the movies, but it is still pretty impressive.
So what does it look like? How does it catch its prey?
Well, so Utricularia, also known as bladderwort, it's an aquatic plant, and it has these tiny bladder-like traps. And these traps, they're submerged in the water.
Okay.
And they have a tiny little trap door. And when an unsuspecting, little insect larva, water flea, anything tiny, brushes up against trigger hairs, the trapdoor springs open, and it just sucks the prey right in.
Oh, wow.
It creates a suction force.
Sucks it in. And this is all happening underwater.
All underwater, yeah. And it happens in a matter of milliseconds, so it's like super fast.
Oh, wow. The poor little prey doesn't stand a chance.
No chance at all. Now, Quiladillo National Park, where this discovery was made, it's already a pretty unique place,
Yeah, it's a UNESCO World Heritage Site, right?
It is. And it's a vital stopover point for birds migrating along the Central Asian Flyway.
So finding a thriving population of these carnivorous plants in such a unique environment, that just adds another layer of, fascination.
Absolutely. It raises a lot of questions about like the food web and the ecological balance of the wetland, all these delicate interactions.
Yeah, it's a good reminder that even in places we think we know well, there are always more discoveries to be made.
Always. Okay, let's shift gears now to something that's, really shaping the future of data and statistics. India just joined the UN Committee of Experts on Big Data and Data Science for official statistics.
Okay, so big data for official statistics. That sounds like a mouthful, but also really important. So what does this committee actually do?
Well, it's all about figuring out how to best use, the power of big data for good.
Good, yeah.
And particularly when it comes to, tracking progress toward the Sustainable Development Goals.
The Sustainable Development Goals, for our listeners who might not be familiar, these are basically a blueprint for a more sustainable future agreed upon by all the countries in the UN.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So you're talking about like ending poverty, combating climate change, ensuring quality education for all, these ambitious global goals.
Right, ambitious but essential goals. And data plays a huge role in that.
And big data especially.
Yes. So this committee is all about finding ways to use that data effectively to measure progress on the SDGs, figure out where we're falling short, and come up with better policies.
So it's not just about collecting data. It's about using it to actually make a difference in the world.
Absolutely. And that's what this committee is working towards.
Okay. Moving on now from the global stage to something a little bit closer to home. There's been an interesting development in India when it comes to organ donation.
Okay, tell me more.
So the National Organ and Tissue Transplant Organization, or NATO,
Right.
has announced new policy for central government employees.
Okay.
If they donate an organ, they will now receive 42 days of special leave.
42 days. Wow.
Yeah. It's a pretty substantial amount of leave.
Yeah.
Right? It's a way to incentivize people to consider becoming organ donors.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And it's a way to acknowledge the significance of this act, right? I mean, it's a big deal.
Absolutely. It's a life-saving gift. So tell me a little bit more about NATO for folks who might not know. Like, what exactly do they do?
Well, NATO is basically the coordinating body for organ and tissue transplants across India.
Okay.
They handle everything from maintaining a national registry of donors and recipients to coordinating the allocation of organs, making sure that the whole process is done safely and efficiently.
So they're kind of like the air traffic controllers of the organ transplant system.
That's a good analogy. They make sure everything runs smoothly.
Yeah, keeping everything organized and moving in the right direction.
Exactly.
Now let's talk about the Boda Tihar Festival.
Boda Tihar Festival.
It's celebrated by the Hadi community in Himachal Pradesh.
Okay.
And their homeland's unique, It actually straddles the border between Himachal Pradesh and Uttarakhand.
Okay, so they're kind of in between two states.
Yeah, right on the border. Now, the Haddis, they had this distinctive white headgear they wear, especially during ceremonial occasions. And they have a fascinating traditional governance system led by a council called the Kumbli.
The Kumbli, interesting.
The name Hadi, it actually comes from their traditional occupation of selling goods at local markets called hots.
Oh, Hadi from Hots.
Exactly. And recently, they achieved a pretty significant milestone. They were granted scheduled tribe status.
Wow, that's a big deal for them.
It is. It's a recognition of their unique cultural identity and their historical presence in the region.
And hopefully opens up opportunities for them.
Absolutely. Now let's move on to a massive project in Bhutan. The first 2 units of the Punat Sanchutu hydroelectric project have just been commissioned.
Punat Sanchutu. Okay, another one for the geography notes.
Definitely. So this is a massive hydropower project.
Yeah.
And it's what we call a run-of-the-river project, which means it uses the natural flow of the river to generate electricity.
Right, so less environmental impact than a traditional dam.
Yeah.
Exactly. It's more environmentally friendly.
Now, this project isn't just about clean energy, though. It's also a great example of regional cooperation.
It is.
Because it's being funded by India, right?
Yes. And all of the surplus power generated by the project, guess what?
It's going to India.
It's going to India.
So Bhutan gets much needed infrastructure development, clean energy, and India gets a reliable source of electricity to meet its ever-growing demands.
Makes sense.
It's a great partnership. But, of course, with any big infrastructure project, there are always potential downsides to consider, right?
Absolutely. Even with, renewable energy projects, you have to think about the environmental impact, the social impact, the economic implications, all of it.
Yeah.
So it's a complex issue.
It is. Now let's get back to that bacteria we were talking about earlier, the one that can break down DEHP.
Oh, yeah, Sulfobacillus acidophilus. I was wondering if there are any updates on that.
Well, researchers have been digging deeper into how this bacteria actually works. And it turns out it's not as simple as we initially thought. It's not just one enzyme doing all the work.
Oh, so it's a team effort.
Exactly. There are actually 5 different enzymes involved. They work together, kind of like a chain reaction, to break down the DEHP and turn it into harmless substances.
So it's like an enzymatic relay race.
Exactly. And it's incredibly efficient.
So are there any hurdles to overcome before this technology can be used more widely?
One of the big challenges is that this process only works for a short time unless it's actually inside the bacteria. So researchers are now trying to figure out how to replicate this process outside of the bacteria so it can be used on a larger scale, maybe in wastewater treatment plants or even landfills.
It would be incredible to see this technology used to combat plastic pollution.
It would. It's a reminder that sometimes the solutions to our biggest problems are found in the smallest of places.
Well, let's jump back into the world of big data.
Okay, I think we were talking about India joining that UN committee on big data.
Right, the UN Committee of Experts on Big Data and Data Science for Official Statistics.
Quite a mouthful.
It is. So they're working on a lot of important stuff, like developing best practices for using big data to track those sustainable development goals.
Right, like figuring out how to measure progress on ending poverty or tackling climate change.
Exactly. They're also looking at how to ensure that data is used ethically and responsibly, because that's a big concern these days.
Absolutely. With great power comes great responsibility, right?
Right. And big data has a lot of power, so we have to be careful how we use it.
It really does. Data can be a powerful tool for progress, but we need to make sure we're using it wisely.
Absolutely. Now let's switch gears to a development that, really highlights the importance of protecting our cultural heritage. We were talking earlier about the Hatti community in Himachal Pradesh.
Right, they just got that recognition as a scheduled tribe.
They did.
Yeah.
Which is a big deal. It acknowledges their unique cultural identity, their history, their connection to that region.
It's a step towards, ensuring their rights and preserving those traditions.
Exactly. And, the Hatties, they have a really rich cultural heritage. The distinctive white headgear, the Kumbli Council, their connection to the land. And their homeland's pretty unique, too. It straddles the border between Himachal Pradesh and Uttarakhand.
It's a testament to their resilience.
It is. And for our UPSC aspirants out there, this is something important to keep in mind. India has so many different tribal communities.
It's part of what makes the country so unique.
It does. And understanding these communities, their history, their challenges, is really crucial for anyone who wants to serve in the Indian Administrative Service.
Absolutely. It's about understanding the fabric of Indian society.
Exactly. All right. From a celebration of heritage, let's move on to a project that harnesses the power of nature.
Okay.
Remember that Punasangshu second hydroelectric project in Bhutan we were talking about earlier?
The run-of-the-river one.
Yes. So it's funded by India, and it's a great example of how countries can work together. Bhutan benefits from the clean energy, the economic development. India gets a reliable source of electricity. It's sort of win-win.
It sounds like it. But, are there any concerns about, the environmental impact of this project?
Well, even with a run-of-the-river project, you have to be mindful of the potential impact.
Right. It's not completely impact-free.
No, you have to think about things like the downstream ecosystems, the river flow patterns, the fish.
The biodiversity.
Exactly. Sustainable development means finding that balance, meeting our needs, but also protecting the environment.
It's a tough balance to strike.
It is, but it's essential. And for our UPSC aspirants listening, this project, it's a great example of how everything is interconnected. Development, the environment, international relations, all of it.
You have to think about all the angles.
You do. All right. Let's get back to that bacteria, that amazing bacteria that can help us deal with plastic waste.
Okay, yeah, Sulfobacillus acidophilus. Tell me, are they getting closer to actually being able to use it on a larger scale?
Well, they're learning more and more about how it actually works.
Yeah, we were talking about that enzymatic relay race, right?
Right? 5 different enzymes working together to break down that DEHP, turn it into harmless stuff. It's incredible the things nature can do.
It really is.
One of the big challenges, though, is figuring out how to make that process work outside of the bacteria. So you could potentially use it in a wastewater treatment plant or even a landfill.
Yeah, that would be a game changer.
It would. And it just goes to show how important scientific research is. You know, we need to keep investing in these kinds of discoveries if we want to solve the big problems we're facing.
Couldn't agree more.
Okay, before we wrap things up, I want to circle back to big data one last time.
Okay.
India joining that UN committee, it's a big step.
It is. It shows a commitment to using data for good.
Exactly. And, this committee, they're doing some really important work, figuring out how to use big data to track progress on things like the Sustainable Development Goals, those big, ambitious goals for a better future.
Ending poverty, tackling climate change, those are big goals.
They are. And they're also figuring out how to make sure the data is being used responsibly and ethically.
That's huge because there's so much potential for misuse, right? Privacy concerns, bias, all of that.
Exactly. It's a powerful tool. We have to be careful with it.
We do.
Well, that about wraps up our deep dive for today. We covered a lot of ground, international crime, scientific discoveries, sustainable tourism, cultural heritage, even a bit of infrastructure, and big data.
It was a packed show.
It was a packed show. And, for our listeners, especially those UPSC aspirants out there, I think it's a good reminder that all these issues, they're interconnected.
They are.
And we need to be able to see those connections, analyze them, think critically.
Absolutely.
So keep learning, keep exploring, stay curious.
And we'll see you next time for another deep dive